Okay, everybody. So today, first of all, this is Gary Fish from Seaview Mortgage, and we have two wonderful guests on here today. We have Gene Calvetto, our favorite realtor, and we also have Mike Mercadante, and he is a person who is an expert in, let's say, environmental issues. So, Gene, you've introduced me to Mike. It's our first conversation. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Gene, and also introduce Mike for us.
All right. Well, I am a realtor. I've been a realtor in the Monmouth and Ocean County area for 26 years, and 9 years prior to that, did property management for a 160 unit apartment complex. So, been around the real estate industry for about 30 years now. And Mike and I had gotten introduced. Actually, he was on the other end of a deal of mine. He did such a wonderful job checking out and remediating a mold issue in a basement that I started recommending him to all my clients.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Mike, tell us, what is this mold remediation, and what are some of the causes, and how do we know that we even have a concern or an issue?
Certainly. First off, thanks for having me, Gene. Thanks for bringing me in. So my company, Dependable Environmental Protection, is a decontamination company of several different types. But mold primarily because of the real estate market being what it's been for the last few years, which has been really busy. A lot of work has come my way, and primarily it's about the idea that a home inspector will go in, do a home inspection, and make a note that there may be possible fungi or mold somewhere. Home inspectors are not certified typically to make a statement, so they make a proposal that it may be. And then I get the call. This will be my 15th year doing this. I'm certified through the National Association of Mold Professionals. They call that NAMP. And what that means is that we've been trained well by professionals who do this because they know what they're doing. So I always tell people, whoever you get to deal with this, just make sure they're certified. Unfortunately, too many people got into the mold thing from Superstorm Sandy that really didn't know what to do, although the money was there and they tried to make it happen. And we followed up a lot of folks and fixed a lot of things. So mold primarily is a health issue. Of course, if you have it in your home on a wall somewhere, it's not very attractive, so you want to get rid of it. But in my viewpoint, it's primarily a health issue. So when people call us and we go to a home, there's two things that typically happen. One is we believe we have mold, but we don't see anything. And the other is we see something, we want to know what it is. So when we don't see anything, the next step is to go do a visual inspection. And that's what we do. We don't charge for that. We want to see what we can see and tell the homeowner what's going on, or the buyer or the seller. And the reason I don't charge for it is because I learned early on that if I do it well, then I'll probably get the work if there's any work to get. So, and people seem to like it because we don't charge them for that. So we go, and down by us, down here in South Jersey, a lot of homes are built, the Long Beach Island is my primary territory. We build homes 3 feet off the ground on pilings. It's a very silly thing to do, but we do that. And the ground is moist because it's an island. It's surrounded by water. And the same thing in inland as well. Grounds can get wet, especially from all the rain. So all that moisture underneath a home affects organic material. And organic material under a home is lumber. So mold is in the air all the time. It floats, it's microscopic, you can't see it. And if it finds moist organic material, it will latch on to that and it will start to root in and start to grow. By the time you see mold, we call it a colony because it's many mold plants, because mold plants are, again, almost microscopic. So when you start to see it, it's been there for a while and it's growing. So if we go in a basement or in an attic or underneath a home and we see that, then we report that to the homeowner. And I always say, listen, just because you have mold underneath your house or in an attic doesn't mean it's in the house, because you don't live in those places. You should live in the house. So I could give my opinion, but I like to tell them it's a good thing to do the science. And the way we do that is we air test the home. And if the report comes back, it's certified, we're certified to do it, the laboratory is certified to send the report, and then we see that there's an issue, a health issue, then I could present that to the homeowner and say, listen, here it is. It's not me telling you this, it's actually the science, and maybe you should take care of it. And then, of course, we can tell them what it would take and how much it would be. So that's if you don't see it. Then if you see it in your home, let's say there was a leak in the kitchen and you see it on the back of the, or you see it on the sheetrock behind the sink or something like that, it kind of means the same thing. The darker the mold, the more toxic it usually is. So, you always hear about black mold.
Right.
So actually called Stachybotrys for the most part. That's the type of mold it is, the name it has. Light molds, less toxic. And there are 3 categories of mold when we get a report back. Common mold, which means you can have as much as that in the house as well as outdoors, but it's not going to affect the human. Toxic mold in a home, you want 0. Because it's not good to live with toxic mold. And then allergenic mold, which is typically found more by the coastal regions of the country. The way it's measured on the report is spores per cubic meter. And typically we look for that to be 300 or less, which means that the great majority of people, even if they're allergenic, they can handle that. Now, some people are extremely allergenic to molds, and even 200 or 100 could be much for them. So I also say, why don't we air test the house? I usually go in with that thought in mind because, again, in my industry, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks who scare people. And because they get scared, they get willing to spend more money than they actually have to. I have found in the years that some of these companies just charge a ridiculous amount of money to do this work. It's really only because they scare people will anybody pay that kind of money. So I don't like telling people that, listen, I could do this, it'll cost you $4,000 and I think you should do it. Well, it's a nice thing. I've been in the business for a while, but if I can show them a report, science, that says this is toxic mold or high levels of allergenic mold, you should do this, then at least I feel more confident in telling them that this is what it costs. And often I find my numbers to sometimes be half of what other companies are. And I'm a normal person. I live in a nice neighborhood, but I can't bring myself to say the numbers that a lot of companies say because they're just ridiculous. So
I can vouch for that.
the idea of science is important to me. The idea of letting the homeowner understand why mold is something you should handle if it's necessary. Those 2 things are really the crux of my work. We've been doing it for 15 years. I used to build homes as a general contractor, so I kind of know how to take it apart, put it back together if in fact we have to do that. A lot of times, most of the work is 1 day, maybe 2, unless it's a tear out and tear down type of setup. But it's an interesting business. I like it a lot. When I built homes, it used to be, 9 months a project. This is usually 1 day or 2, so it makes it much easier on my stress level. I'm getting old now. Next year I'll be 70, so I'm hoping to retire. But I like doing it. The guys I work with, my foreman and I grew up since grammar school, so we have a good time all the time. We're best friends. And the other guys that work for me, they're all in their 30s or 40s, so there's no kids. We have 2 things about our company, and almost every job before we start, I look at one of them and say, tell me what they are. One is leave it cleaner than when we got there, and the other one is make sure we do what we say we're going to do. Those are the 2 things that we live by. But people like Gene and other realtors have definitely over the years been really kind to us, given us a lot of work. And it is a good business. I like it a lot. I like helping the people, especially if I can help them both health-wise and financially. It's a real rewarding thing for me.
Well, that's a great code of ethics. And I know that if Gene even said that I know somebody that does a good job, I know I can take that to the bank, so to speak. And I know that's the case. So thank you for all that information. It's a lot more information that was very useful and helpful to me. So Gene, what can you say? Anything that Mike has done for you recently and customer satisfaction? I mean, give him an
Well, I
endorsement.
have a question first. On a house that has a slab, is there a possibility that mold could be found?
So concrete, when it's poured as a slab, ought to have a vapor barrier or a sheet of plastic underneath it before it's poured. And the reason is that concrete, like a candle, wicks moisture out of the ground. So if you put the plastic down first, the concrete doesn't touch the ground and it doesn't wick up the wet or the moisture. So if it's done correctly, typically the answer is no. Homes on slabs don't usually have it because it's not, being taken up from the ground. If it's not done that way, which happens often enough, then yes, homes on slabs can definitely have mold. The other thing about a slab is when the home is built on a slab, the slab is usually grade level. So if the connection between the slab and the wall is not very, very, very tight and solid, then water can seep through there underneath onto the wood and then up the wood onto the sheetrock. It's all about sucking moisture up from the bottom and going up. And the other half of it is when there's a leak and the water's coming down. So those are the two areas we look at first.
Well, Gary, to answer your question, Mike has been in more crawl spaces for me than I care to count. And some, like the one house we were talking about, up in Ocean area, Waretown, was like a flood zone. Do you remember that?
Yes, that's also a crazy thing, how people build homes where there's, usually water sitting on the ground. Hopefully when you do that, you build up the ground and get it out of that flood area, but sometimes they don't do that. I don't know why. Silly.
Well, Mike, if
Have you,
somebody, go ahead, Gene.
go ahead, Gary, go ahead.
I was going to say, Mike, give out your information so that, people who would like more information on this, they have your number, your phone number, your email, and, give us that information if you will now.
I'll tell you the website because that pretty much has everything on it.
Okay.
Simple thing. It's Dependable Environmental Protection. So it's the letters DEP and then New Jersey NJ.com. So it's DEPNJ.com.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
easy.
has phone numbers and emails and everything else.
Perfect. Perfect. Gene, what were you going to say?
I have just one more question. So you know how there's underground springs that are around that people don't know about? Have you seen any of them travel that homes that did not have a water issue under their crawl space now have issues?
Absolutely. In fact, we just dealt with one, believe it or not, on Long Beach Island in Surf City that has a spring underneath it. I grew up kind of on Long Beach Island, and I never even knew there were springs underneath the island, but there are, and other places on the mainland as well. But those springs don't always show up underneath the home as far as a puddle of water. But even if they're 6 inches under the ground itself, the moisture that they release into that soil and then go up onto the lumber is a constant thing because it's always running. We often do vapor barriers over the top of the ground for crawl spaces because of that reason. You want to keep the moisture from getting to the lumber. So we put a vinyl barrier over the top of that, come up the walls, and that keeps all the moisture from getting up. So it is an odd thing. It doesn't, the chances are having an underground spring in your neighborhood or underneath your home are not big, but they do happen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
Well,
Gene, how about yourself? Give out your information so people can reach out to you.
well, people can reach me. I now set it up on my website, homesbygene.net, and they can reach me through there. That's probably the best way now to reach me because sometimes I'm busy and I can't answer my phone.
Okay. All right. And I can be reached. I prefer my cell phone number is 732-580-5667. And it's Gary Fish at Seaview Mortgage. But I think we're going to hopefully have some people giving some calls over to you, Mike. This is something that comes up quite often. I just had a transaction only 2 weeks ago. The homeowner down in Manahawkin had an issue with mold. and
Mhm.
wish I had had your information at the time to share with them. So you are actually a pretty good wealth of knowledge here. So thank you very much. But,
Thanks for having me, both of you guys. I appreciate it.
well,
Oh, thank
everybody,
you for coming.
all right,
Okay,
everybody have a great day.
bye-bye
You
now.
too.
Take care.